The morning began the way most mornings did in the narrow lane behind the old market, where the air always smelled faintly of wet cardboard, boiled tea leaves, and yesterday's rain. The woman pushed her rusted cart slowly, her shoulders bent not from age, but from the careful way she carried herself, as if each step was meant to soften the world rather than disturb it. Her hair was hidden beneath a faded scarf, her hands wrapped in thin gloves that had once been white and now carried the gray memory of countless days of work. To anyone watching, she was just another garbage collector beginning her rounds before the city truly woke up. But this morning carried a weight that had nothing to do with trash or streets or schedules. It carried the quiet weight of a test, one not written on paper, not spoken aloud, but felt deeply in the heart of the one pushing that cart. The house stood at the end of the lane, tall and carefully painted, with iron gates polished so often they reflected the sky. It was the kind of home people admired from a distance, the kind that suggested comfort, success, and order. Inside that house lived a young woman who had married into privilege, though few knew how heavy that privilege could be when wrapped in expectations. She woke that morning with the sound of servants moving softly down the halls and the smell of expensive coffee drifting under her door. Her life looked complete from the outside, but something in her chest always felt unfinished, like a sentence cut off before its meaning could fully form. She had learned early that kindness was optional in circles like hers. Politeness was expected, generosity admired when it was convenient, but compassion, the kind that stooped low and touched the dust, was rarely practiced. Still, there were moments when her heart tugged against the lessons she had learned. She often felt it when she looked out the window and saw people moving through the world unnoticed. That morning, as she stepped into the courtyard to supervise preparations for a luncheon, her eyes caught sight of the garbage collector approaching the gate. The guards stiffened slightly, already preparing to wave the woman away as they often did when they felt someone didn't belong near wealth. But before they could speak, the young woman lifted her hand. "Let her come," she said quietly. The guards hesitated, then obeyed. The woman with the cart paused, surprised, and offered a small nod before pushing forward. Her eyes were gentle but observant, taking in the manicured garden, the marble steps, the expensive shoes peeking from beneath flowing clothes. She had walked many streets like this one, but each time felt different, as though the world waited to see how she would be received. "What do you need?" the young woman asked, her voice polite but cautious. The collector smiled faintly. "Just doing my work, madam. I won't be in the way long." Something in that voice, steady, unashamed, made the young woman hesitate. She gestured toward a shaded corner near the gate. "You can rest there for a moment if you like. It's already warm." The guards exchanged looks. Rest? No one ever offered that. But the woman insisted, and the collector nodded, easing herself down with a soft exhale. For a moment neither spoke. Then the collector reached into her pocket and pulled out a small cloth, wiping her hands before touching anything. "It's kind of you," she said. "Most people don't see us." The words landed softly but carried weight. The young woman felt something shift inside her chest. "I see you," she replied, surprising even herself. They spoke of small things at first, the weather, the early hour, the way the city never truly slept. Then the conversation drifted, as conversations sometimes do, toward life. The collector spoke of long days and tired bones, of how dignity was something you carried inside when the world refused to offer it. She spoke without bitterness, as if her hardships were simply facts, not wounds. The young woman listened, truly listened, for perhaps the first time in a long while. She forgot about the luncheon, the guests, the image she was supposed to maintain. She only saw a person in front of her, breathing, existing, carrying stories in the lines of her face. "Do you ever feel invisible?" the collector asked gently. The question caught her off guard. She thought of the grand rooms, the expectations, the way people praised her for things she had never earned. "Yes," she admitted softly. More than you'd think. The collector nodded, as if she understood completely. Sometimes, she said, being surrounded by everything can still feel like having nothing that's truly yours. There was a pause, filled with the distant sound of traffic and birds calling from somewhere beyond the walls. The young woman felt something warm and unsettling bloom behind her eyes. No one had spoken to her like this in years. Moved by impulse, she stood and went inside, returning with a glass of water and a small plate of food. She placed it gently beside the collector. "Please," she said, "have some." The collector looked at the offering, then up at her, eyes shining with something unreadable. "Thank you," she said slowly. "You don't know what this means." "I think I do," the young woman replied. From that moment, the air between them changed. What had begun as a simple act of courtesy became a quiet exchange of humanity. They spoke longer, deeper. The collector asked about the young woman's life, her dreams before marriage, the things she had loved before responsibility weighed everything down. The young woman answered honestly, surprised by her own openness. She did not notice the guards watching in confusion, or the way the household staff whispered behind curtains. All she felt was the strange sense that this conversation mattered more than any gathering she had ever hosted. When the collector finally stood to leave, she moved more slowly, as if each step carried meaning. She adjusted her scarf and looked at the young woman with a gaze that seemed to see far beyond the moment. "Kindness," she said softly, "is never wasted, even when it feels small, especially then." The young woman nodded, unsure why her throat felt tight. "Will I see you again?" she asked without thinking. The collector smiled, a gentle, knowing smile. "Life has a way of crossing paths again," she replied. When hearts are open, as the cart rolled away, the young woman stood still long after it disappeared down the lane. Something inside her had shifted, as if a door she didn't know existed had been opened. She went back inside, but the house felt different now. Quieter, smaller. The walls that once felt protective now seemed to echo. She moved through her day distracted, replaying the conversation in her mind, wondering why it had affected her so deeply. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in amber and rose, she found herself standing by the window again, looking out at the street. She thought about kindness, not as an act, but as a way of seeing. And for the first time, she questioned how many people she had overlooked simply because she had been taught to look past them. What she did not know was that the woman with the cart had not wandered far. From a quiet corner, unseen, she watched the house one last time, her expression thoughtful, almost heavy with emotion. The test she had come to conduct was already unfolding in ways she had not fully expected, because what she had witnessed was not perfection, but something far more rare, an unguarded moment of humanity in a world trained to measure worth by appearances. And that, she knew, was only the beginning. The days that followed would bring choices, revelations, and truths long hidden beneath comfort and routine. They would stretch hearts and test intentions. And as paths crossed again in ways neither woman could predict, the meaning of kindness would be examined not in words, but in sacrifice, courage, and the quiet decisions made when no one was watching. In the end, what changed everything was not wealth revealed or secrets uncovered, but the quiet courage of a heart that chose compassion when no reward was promised. The truth, when it finally surfaced, did not arrive with shock or triumph, but with a gentle understanding that character is never proven by what one owns, but by how one treats those the world ignores. The woman who had once stood in fine clothes behind tall gates realized that her greatest inheritance was not comfort or security, but the ability to see another human being without judgment. And the one who had walked in worn shoes in silence walked away knowing that her faith in kindness had not been misplaced. When the final moment came and all masks fell away, there was no anger, no shame, only reflection. The lesson had already done its work. A heart had been softened, a life had been redirected, and a bond formed not through blood or status, but through empathy, remained unbroken. The test was never about wealth or deception. It was about whether love could exist without conditions, and whether dignity could be offered before it was demanded. Long after the truth settled into memory, its echo continued to guide every choice that followed. Because once someone learns to see people for who they are, rather than what they appear to be, there is no returning to blindness. Kindness, once awakened, becomes a quiet promise to notice, to care, and to choose humanity even when the world offers every excuse not to.